The deer, at 1, they're pretty passive. At 2, some of them will get a little bit aggressive. At 3 years old, they're getting to be a bugger. I mean, they're almost getting to be a pain in your butt because they get really aggressive at 3. It gets worse at 4 and at 5. At 5, I mean, they just want to split skulls, with another buck. That's all they want to do. So right. I honestly don't even like having 4-year-old bucks on my farm. But the 3-year-old and my dominant buck is enough that on mock scrapes and stuff, it really gets your older bucks going, but yet it doesn't scare off too much of the younger bucks if they go smell it.
Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 289. Richard Cook, Mastering Deer Urine Scent, Fatal Attraction Formula. Support for the Big Buck Registry and the Deer Hunt Podcast comes from -33 Merino Wool Layering System. Timeless natural insulation, keeping you warm on the coldest days while staying breathable and wicking away moisture on the wet ones. Rackology. Everything you need in one bag. Now available at Rural King and Orslin Farm and Home storefronts or online at www.rackology.org. Grizzly Ears, the most advanced engineered wireless earbuds for the outdoors. Covert scouting cameras, remote cameras for hunting, wildlife, and security. And Big Buck merch. You can get cool, high-quality Big Buck t-shirts, long-sleeve t-shirts, and hoodies. And show support for this podcast by visiting BigBuckRegistryMerch.com. That's BigBuckRegistryMerch.com. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hi, this is Barry Wenzel from Brothers of the Bow and Trophy Whitetail Boot Camps. You're about to push play on what is now my favorite podcast, Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hey, this is Dr. Carl Miller, and you're listening to my favorite hunting podcast on the internet, the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast.
Hey, this is Hal Blood from Big Woods Bucks, and you're about to push play on my favorite podcast, the Big Buck Registry.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow predators. My name is Jay, and thank you for tuning in to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. For Dusty Phillips and Jim Keller and the entire staff here at the Big Buck Registry, welcome to this week's show. There are a couple things I'd like you to do for us if you could. If you would, please check us out on iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review. With your help, we're going to try and push this show up the iTunes charts. I know we have a lot of listeners out there, and I need you to take some action. I need you to leave a review and subscribe to the show. If you do subscribe, that'll give you access and notification each and every week that a new show is released. You can also access this show in its entirety on YouTube, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and as an Amazon Alexa skill. Go to Alexa and say, Alexa, enable Big Buck Registry. It's all right there for you to access on demand at your fingertips. Regarding the harness program, we have an ample supply of harnesses to give away from our volunteer donors. If you're in need of a full-body harness, please send an email to j@bigbuckregistry.com. Just when you thought you heard it all about deer urine, deer scent attractants, deer behavior, and deer farming, along comes Richard Cook, the formulation master wizard behind Cook's Fatal Attraction deer scent lures. Unlike many brands with expired, diluted product, Richard raises deer, collects specimens, and ships his extremely fresh, undiluted product quickly. It's like shopping for organic anything directly on the farm itself. We take a deep dive into Richard's deer scent operation. We'll get to our entire interview with Richard Cook in just one moment, but before we do, let's hear from our friends at -33 Merino Wool Products and Jim Keller with the Deer News. Let's talk about a hunter's layering system for a sec. We need to be ready for any weather that Mother Nature throws at us. With the layering concepts that -33 has created with their incredible merino wool products, they've got you covered. The Minus 33's Merino Wool Expedition Weight garments will keep you warm on the coldest late season days while regulating and wicking away moisture in a way that only merino wool can do. You see, wool will absorb up to 30% of its weight in moisture without leaving you feeling wet or clammy, and wool insulates better than cotton or polyester and protects against hypothermia on those late season hunts. And here's another interesting point. You might not think of wool for early season, but with the Minus 33 wicking technology, I'll take a lightweight Minus 33 base layer any day in warm weather. Merino wool fibers naturally reject any bacteria found in moisture or sweat and gives you double protection against odor as your target buck approaches. Visit www.minus33.com to learn more about Minus 33's layering technology. Use the code BIGBUCK33 to get 10% off your next order.
Now here's Jim Keller with the deer news.
Our first story this week. West Virginia hunter takes down 17-point buck after tracking it for 6 years. This story is from the Fox News website and was posted by Michael Holland. Some things are just worth waiting for. After spending 6 years tracking and watching the animal grow, a hunter finally put down a massive buck. His patience paid off as he now gets to say he took down a 17-pointer. David Miller first spotted the animal in 2013, the West Virginia Gazette-Mail reported. Miller and his friends had leased a piece of property in Mingo County, West Virginia, and would notice the impressive animal on a network of game cameras they had set up. Miller said he was able to recognize the buck due to its identifiable antler points. After noticing the animal seemed to be avoiding certain areas, Miller set up a camera where he thought the buck might avoid hunters. After the camera made a rare daytime spotting of the animal, Miller went to work, bringing a bow and arrow with him. Despite coming across several other impressive bucks on his hunt, Miller stayed patient. "I caught a movement at one of the scrapes," Miller told the Gazette-Mail. "The old buck had slipped in. He lowered his head to go under a branch, and I could see it was him. He stepped out into the open about 18 yards away. When his head went behind a tree, I shot him." Miller shared photos of his triumphant moment on Facebook. 17 scoreable points and 9.5 years old. He rough gross scored at 179 inch and change. Miller said, "I'm still reflecting on it all and have not wrapped my head around it yet, but I look forward to sharing this story because it means so much to me, mostly because of the people involved through it all. So much has happened over the years. Truly incredible." Survey says firearms deer hunting leads to less violence. This story is from the Tribe Live website and was reported by Bob Fry. Deer hunters are killers, but not of each other or their neighbors. That's what the research says anyway. Ball State economics professor Paul Niekamp looked at the relationship between violent crimes and deer hunting seasons in 21 states over 20 years. He recently released the results of his work. Deer seasons, Niekamp said, are unique, unparalleled by any policy in existence. In arming people across rural America, each year more than 10 million Americans, about 18% of all American gun owners, use firearms to hunt deer during restricted dates. There are no policies that induce 600,000 Wisconsin males or 530,000 Michigan males to systematically and temporarily carry and use firearms, he said. Yet examining crime statistics from the peak hunting days did not show any spikes in violence. In fact, the opposite is true. Niekamp determined that there are roughly 12% fewer violent crimes on the first 2 days of firearm deer season than otherwise in rural areas. At the same time, the study also found that alcohol-related arrests for juvenile males fell by 22% and narcotic offenses fell by 15% at the start of hunting season. That, he said, suggests firearm hunting may have a positive effect on behavior. There may be larger societal reasons for that. Young rural males typically learn about guns differently than do young urban ones, Niekamp said. Historically, hunting has primarily been a tradition passed down from father to son. Young urban males, he added, are more likely to grow up in fatherless homes, which increases risk for participating in gangs or criminal activity. Overall, Niekamp advanced 3 possible reasons for why crime goes down when hunting participation goes up. First, hunting is a time-consuming activity that is inherently incapacitating, which may decrease crime. Second, hunters may face more regulation than other gun owners. And third, rural Americans own different guns for different reasons than the population average. There's also some truth, it seems, to those bumper stickers reading like, "Hunt with your kids, not for them." Niekamp said in rural areas, additional recreational opportunities like hunting may assist in keeping juveniles out of trouble. 1 in a million, 3 antlered deer caught on camera roaming in Michigan wilderness. This story is from the Kansas City Star website and was reported by Chakur Koop. A deer with 3 antlers was spotted roaming in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Experts say it's a 1 in a million thing, according to the Detroit Free Press. Steve Lindbergh, a former state lawmaker who often photographs nature, captured photos of the buck, according to the Facebook post. For all the doubters who think the picture was altered, Lindbergh shared a second image of the deer just to dispel any Photoshop rumors, Lindbergh wrote. Steve Edwards, a large animal veterinarian, looked at the pictures and thinks they're real, according to the Detroit Free Press. Edwards believes the third antler could be the result of an unusual development when the deer was still in the embryo, the Associated Press reported. Lindbergh wants the deer to survive this deer hunting season, WLUC reported. At the end of the day, I'll be honest with you. I'd like to get more pictures of that deer, Lindbergh told WLUC. I'd like to see if it comes back next year, so I'm kind of rooting for it to make it through the deer season. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer News. Special thanks to Daniel Applebaum and John Geis for leads on stories this week. For links to the stories featured this week, please check our show notes at www.bigbuckregistry.com. If you have any ideas for future topics or have any questions about these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Thanks to Jim Keller for the Deer News. Without further ado, here is Richard Cook. Richard Cook, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, Jay?
I'm doing very well, very well. We're in the middle of deer season in New Hampshire, and I think Dusty, where are you at with your season right now?
We're at about the halfway point. We got another week of bow here. Then, we got Youth Deer Gun Weekend coming up here this weekend. And then the following week after Thanksgiving will be opening day of Ohio Deer Gun. So we're at the halfway marker.
And Richard, you're in Minnesota, correct?
Yes, I am. Central Minnesota.
Where are you at in your season?
We just finished the 9-day gun season on Sunday. And in northern Minnesota, they got a 16-day season. So if you want to go hunt up there, you can until this following Sunday.
Gotcha. Very cool. Well, Richard, the reason I wanted to have you on the show is because I think you're a knowledgeable authority on deer scent. We've had deer scents on our authorities before, but what I think is making you different is that you're kind of getting into some of this newer stuff we're seeing with like wax-based applicants. And from our conversation we had the other day, you actually collect your own urine and scent. So this is a little different. Most of the people that I know aren't doing that, and I'm curious to find out how one gets into that kind of business and get your background and kind of figure out what's to this stuff. And I'm hearing good things about your product, and I know you told me the other day you ship a lot to Maine, which kind of blew my mind. Didn't know Mainers actually bought this stuff. So you're doing something a little bit different than the rest of the guys that are in this niche in the outdoor industry. So I'm interested to hear your entire story.
Yeah, I like to get 100% pure, fresh, no water, no preservative scent products. And the best way to do that is really to have your own deer herd and collect it yourself.
Okay.
That way I have control of everything. The quality of the scent, the sanitation, everything like that. Right. I bring the does into Estrus myself.
Okay.
Through my artificial insemination protocol.
Okay.
So I can cycle my does as I need the doe estrus scent from anywhere from September all the way in through December.
Gotcha. All right. And I want to bring Dusty in on this a little bit when we get into it, but because he knows a lot more about that stuff, because he's gone through classes for breeding cows, and so he knows a lot more about that subject matter than I do. But so I think this will be a good blend of all kinds of things. Before we get into more of that stuff, can you tell me about yourself? What's your background? How does one get into the deer urine business?
Well, first of all, you got to have deer. And in order to do that, here in Minnesota, you got to get a license from the state of Minnesota.
Okay.
And we're regulated by the Minnesota Board of Animal Health. And they come out and inspect your pen and your facility and all that. You got to meet their requirements. And then you're able to purchase deer. So I had some friends that I knew that raised deer. And they had a good herd and a nice healthy herd. So I got talking to him because I knew I was going to collect deer scent, and that's why I bought my own deer. So that's the start of getting into it.
What made you want to do it?
Because when I was younger, here in Minnesota, you could start hunting when you were 12 years old. And I did that, and I bought a bottle of deer scent, and I used it, and just had no results with it. And that kept being a trend. I used it for like 10 years, and it was a really good idea, the scent to put out for deer, but no results. And I just knew that, hey, this is a really good idea, but someone's cutting corners somewhere, and it's not working the way it should.
And that was when you were 12?
Yeah. When I was 12, I first bought a bottle of scent. And about the time I was 20, I knew that one day I was going to make scent for myself and for friends and hunting party, the members of our hunting party.
Gotcha. So you were hunting back when you were 12, and just kind of getting into some of your backstory. Who got you into hunting in the first place? I mean, it's not every household has hunters, and I'm always interested to find out how each person got into it. What's your backstory there?
My dad hunted a little bit with my grandpa when I was real young. And then since then, he bought a dairy farm, and that kind of ended the hunting or whatever. And that's when I got to be 12 years old. So my dad and my grandpa and my uncles on my mom's side, they all hunted, all gun hunting back in that day. And I just grew up always seeing hunters around, seeing the deer hanging from the garage rafters. And I just fell in love with it right away. I wanted to go when I was 6 years old, but we couldn't.
Gotcha. All right. So you had a family influence, as
exactly.
a lot of people do. Gotcha. Well, so it's interesting that as a 12-year-old, I mean, that you decided as a 12-year-old to say, hey, I'm going to spend some of my money on deer scent or deer urine to help my hunting go better, right? I don't know a lot of 12-year-olds that would necessarily think to do that.
Well, my uncles were using deer scent. Okay. So that's where I got the idea.
All right. So you saw your uncles do it, and you're like, all right, I'm going to get some for myself.
Yeah.
Kind of copying the adults and thinking that's probably
watching your peers.
Your peers, yeah. Kind of studying, learning. Got it. So fast forward from age 12 to age 20, and you decide that you're going to get into the industry. And how did you walk us through a lot of that stuff? Because that's very interesting.
If you go back a little bit, okay, when I was 12 is when I bought my first bottle, but I knew at the age of 20 that I was going to make my own one day.
Okay.
I was actually 41 when I got into the industry.
Okay.
I just knew that when the time was right, I was going to buy my own deer and I was going to make my own scent because the idea is brilliant. If it's a good product, it should work to draw deer in. But I couldn't find that good product, and I tried different brand, and minimal or none for the results.
Okay. Let's get into some of the kind of I guess trial and error, because just because you want to do it doesn't mean that things go smoothly. And Dusty, maybe you can pick it up from here. I want to hear kind of how this process started, and I don't want you to give away any of your secrets or anything, but I want to know how does one start with a herd of deer? How do you get a herd of deer so that you can start collecting it? And how do you figure out, what devices to use collecting urine? That seems like a whole learning process. And maybe there's a textbook out there somewhere on this, but it seems foreign to me.
It was my farming background that gave me the idea. You have the pans and alleyways, and I got a little collection stall so you move the deer down the alleyway when you want to collect the scent, and then you break down that alleyway, because deer are unlike cattle. They don't like to be pushed. They like to come back. They like to face you, and they like to come back through you. So you got to keep breaking that alleyway down into a small section there. And then guillotine doors are really good, because once they go through, you can actually just drop the rope and it locks them in. And that'd be my collection stall.
Gotcha. And do they end up like, is the floor a special kind of floor so you can collect it?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yep. And I do one deer per collection. I don't like to have multiple deer in there, especially bucks. It's almost impossible to have multiple bucks in there because they like to fight and they don't like to be put together.
Okay. Dusty, you want to get in here and kind of go through some of the process to bring deer into Estrus, I guess, so that you can start collecting some of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna, Rich, I'm gonna question that. I'm assuming that it's the same process for a whitetail deer, but without the full year of estrus cycle. So I'm assuming that it's going to be the short days of the year that's going to trigger the hormone from the brain to trigger the ovaries to come into cycle. Now, is there a process of cedar, which is a hormone placement, or is there shots, or how do you cycle your dose?
Yes, the cedar, 100%. You're correct. I'll take the doe, and I actually got to handle her 3 times. I take the doe, I put the cedar in her for 15 days.
Okay.
So this is our artificial insemination protocol. When I decide to breed, I'll have a vet here to breed at the exact time. If I decide to collect the estrus, I'll put her in the collection stall and collect that, and don't breed her. So you put that cedar in her for 15 days.
Okay.
And then you got to handle her the second time. You remove it, and then I give her a shot of estrogen. And then in the correct amount of time, she will be ready for that vet to come there and breed her. But instead of getting her bred, which is 56 hours, and instead of getting her bred, I'll put her in that collection stall, and I collect that urine. And then to verify that she was in estrus, when she's locked in this collection stall, and I got that alleyway coming to this collection stall, I'll go grab one of my bucks from my buck pen and run him down there, and he'll tell me in seconds whether she's ready to be bred, because he's just pawing the ground at the door and raking his rack into the door, and he's wanting to breed her.
Gotcha. That completely makes sense. So I'm assuming when you do your cedars, I'm just going to kind of walk through the whole process. So I'm assuming, do you use a head gate, or how do you place cedars?
No, I tranquilize them.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, yeah, that's what I was curious on, how the method of getting the cedar placement. And if somebody don't know what a cedar is, that's just a little T-looking, almost looks like a long bullet, and that gets inserted in with an applicator, cedar applicator, into the female cavity. And that releases the hormones, which triggers the brain stimulation for the ovaries to go into cycle. And that cedar releases a high volume of hormone to keep that estrous cycle on a timely fashion. So it don't allow her to cycle naturally. When you pull the cedar, the levels start to settle down, and then it triggers into the brain stimulating the ovaries for the actual cycle of the coming in a full estrus. And that's something that, we do the same thing in cattle, and you can induce an hormone shot too that will help push that hormone level along in the proper fashion. But very interesting that you have to tranquilize to insert the application of the cedar into the doe. Continue from there. So once you've got your cedar in, you went your 15 days, the vet comes, you pull the cedar, you wait your 56 hours for the heat cycle to start in. The buck comes in, shows you that she's in full estrus. Then where do you go from there?
Then I just let her in that collection stall for 48 hours, and she's got food and water, and she just does her natural thing. She's in there. She's all calm. I only do this with calm deer that like that, because that results in a better scent. You don't want the stress in that urine.
Absolutely. It's somebody that's listening, for a deer to come into a really good, strong estrus, the nutrition plays a huge factor in any animal or livestock for them to come into a good, strong estrus cycle. And, that tells me that when you're doing this, your deer are in good shape, nutritional wise, health wise, everything's got to line up. It's really amazing how everything's got to line up for this natural estrus to come into play.
And it's important to note too that any time I need that doe to come into estrus through that protocol, I can have her. So I've got estrus ready on September 1st, and I've got orders coming daily at that time, because there's a lot of hunters that like using estrus that early in the season.
Gotcha. And I'm curious if you can make a doe cycle in, let's say, June of the year. Is that a possibility, or is it only the short days?
No, 100%. You pick the day. You pick the day, and I'll have her ready that day, and even down to the hour. Because when we call the vet here, if let's just say if you actually are gonna artificially inseminate these deer,
Mm-hmm.
you got the semen, you got the semen tank. You spend a lot of money, thousands of dollars on this semen, and you got this vet coming out here. You're paying his bill. So if you have anywhere from 5 to 20 does that you want bred, they all have to be synchronized exactly right down to the minute. As a matter of
Right.
fact, if you want to try to hit the 100% reception rate, so yeah, it's a science.
We're going to move forward a little bit into so we'll fall back. Note that we're going to fall back onto the collection of the urine and the process from the collection point. But so when you decide, I'm assuming some of your does you go ahead and breed with an AI form. And do you house the semen? And do you own the tank and house the semen, or do you have the vet house the semen and own the tank?
Yeah, I don't own a tank. I have the vet do it.
Curious, yeah, just curious because I like when I do mine, I've got everything in house here. So I've got all my cedars, all my shots, all my semen. I got a tank. I got a semen warmer. I'm fully a one man operation. Whenever I like to do a natural heat versus sinking them. If it's just on a small farm. But I was curious to see if you house your own semen. But so when they come out and you've cycled your does and you're ready for the artificial insemination, you go ahead and do that with some of your does. Tell us a little bit about that. I just want to touch base because it's super interesting and it's almost another subject that we could tangent off to. But I just want to talk about it briefly. So how many does do you normally breed a year?
I usually breed about 10 does a year.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I didn't actually AI any does last year, but I've did it in the past here. But yeah, I do that same thing, and I probably did like 5 the last time I did it.
Okay.
And yeah, I just synchronize them. I have them set for the date. First of all, you call the veterinarian and ask what day they can do it, and then I match that up through this synchronization so that when he says he can be here, that's when I line up that time.
Gotcha. What's your percentage on your conception rate?
Well, the best way is if you lap AI, that laparoscopic. 70 to 80% is really good. I mean, once in a while you can hit 100%, but 70 to 80% is doing well.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Very good. That's pretty high percentage, really. It as far as comparing it to a cattle, you shoot for a 70% conception rate, and then I mean it's close to the same thing. But if you're in the 80, that's really good for a herd of 10. That's pretty.
And if you do it vaginal, it's probably more like 50%.
Gotcha. And then, is there any reason behind that?
If you talk to the vet, yeah, they say they're a lot different. And I don't know all the terms. They say it's a lot different than a cattle, though, because of the canal that it's got to go up through. They say a cow is kind of more of a straight push. The semen in the deer got to go up around. It almost seems like a gooseneck the way they describe it to me, and it's really hard for that to happen.
Okay, yeah, that's something that definitely sparks my interest, but I've not researched and got educated on. So I was just curious if you knew what the difference was there. But super interesting. But yeah, so back to, we kind of ran off on a tangent there, and that's okay sometimes because it's super interesting. But so once that you've cycled your deer and you know that the bucks told you that they're in full estrus, then you give them 48 hours in a stall and you collect that urine there. So what happens once you've collected the urine?
Well, it's a little bit different. I actually after you pull that cedar and I give that shot, then that 56 hours later, I put her in the collection stall. So she is already starting to collect the urine. I'm ready to start the urine collection, and then I run the buck by to verify that she's in estrus while she's in there.
Gotcha. Okay. So once you
did that make sense?
Yeah, completely, absolutely. So once you get the buck in there and he lets you know that she's in full estrus, and then you collect the urine, what's the process after the urine collection?
Well, as soon as she urinates, here's what keeps us separate from maybe some other scent companies too. As soon as she urinates, it goes down, and I've got it. Temperature control is critical for the bacteria growth. So as soon as it goes down into my container, it's already starting to get cooled down. And I'll go out there 3 times a day and get that urine just because I don't want it to warm up. The colder I can have it, the better. And then I strain it, filter it because I want it to be clean. And I'll do that, and then I'll bottle it. I'll bottle it into a gallon jug, and then later on that day, I'll bottle it right into either my 1 ounce or 4 ounce bottles.
Gotcha. When you're talking about cooling it as soon as it hits the pin bottom, is there a method for that, or is it something that we can talk about, or is there a refrigeration, or how's that process work?
Yeah, it's a refrigerated. I mean, I got it like a refrigeration. It goes down into a collection, basically like a bowl.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Super interesting. So then you gallon jug it up, and then filter it, clean it up, and then you start bottling. And that's where it comes into the fresh urine getting bottled.
Right, and then I check my orders and then ship it out right away.
Super interesting. So it's that quick.
Yeah, it really is. And there's certain days of the week I really like to have my does pee in there because I know that Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays are my big order days.
Gotcha. Okay. So you get prepared for the orders to come in.
Yeah, I kind of know. I've been doing this for 7 years now, so I kind of know how the orders come in, and people like to order them a lot, like Saturday night, Sunday night, Monday night.
Gotcha. Okay. So how many deer at one time can you have on their estrus cycle to be collecting from?
I like to cycle it so that just one is in there at a time, but I may have one in there for 2 days, and then as soon as she's out, the next one goes in. Okay. I do that more like in November.
Gotcha. Okay. And what's the ounces per doe in estrus that you can receive?
See, that's another trick too, because you got to learn your does. Some of them have big bladders and some of them don't. So once you know, like a lot of times I have 20 does here, and I know which ones are the tamer and which ones have the bigger bladder. Mm-hmm. So, and as you would know, I mean, there's a cost associated with them cedars and this and that. So you want to get, more bang for your buck in a way by getting more urine in that 48 hours. A good doe, this is what I would call a good doe. A good doe will urinate a gallon in 24 hours.
Well, that's pretty good. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
But with that being said, now that it's November like this and it's colder, guess what? They're not drinking that much water. And I mean, that can go all the way down to a third of a gallon on your better does.
Gotcha. Yeah, that completely makes sense that the liquid intake is not needed for the cooler weather versus the warmer conditions where they're needing to take in the liquid. That completely makes sense. The body's just slowing down a little bit for the colder conditions. And deer naturally go into a cold climate state of mind where they slow down their intake and slow down their internals to not process so much as quick. And they don't need all that nutrition as far as liquid volume into their system when they're not sweating or running, or it completely makes sense.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So then from the bottle to the customer, you're talking just a few days then.
Yeah, I can get it most places in 2 days. Some are 3, as long as you're not real rural in your state, because I ship USPS, and that's what they tell me at the post office is, hey, as long as it's not real rural, a lot of places you can get it in 2 days. Most places within 3 days.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, do you collect buck scent also, buck urine?
I do.
So can we kind of get into that a little bit, touch base on that? When obviously they cycle into a rut also, is that will the buck get worked up no different when you sink them like that in September? Will he get testosterone flowing when he knows that there's a doe in heat when you let him come in for the smell test?
Yeah, he will, but that's if I have a collection stall right next to to my doe that's in estrus. If you just let him go sniff the one time, he won't get rutted up. But if you have him in there for a long period of time, he will. And that's how I collect my rutting buck scent.
Okay, so you actually put the buck next to the stall where you're actually collecting the doe and heat estrus.
With separation. Yep.
Yeah, if you've got several deer synced and you know that, over the next 10, 15 days you're going to be collecting urine, that does make sense that a buck could get his testosterone levels over a week or two of time, get himself amped up enough to be into almost like a rut state of mind.
Right. And I don't do that one like in September. I do that one more in October because I don't get a lot of orders for the rutting buck in September. My dominant buck scent I do.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
The dominant buck scent is buck pee.
Right. So
I just run a buck in and collect the urine from him.
Is that do you worry about the age of the buck, or is there any
I do. I found the best results in 3-year-old bucks. They're not the deer at 1, they're pretty passive. At 2, some of them will get a little bit aggressive. Mm-hmm. At 3 years old, they're getting to be a bugger. I mean, they're almost getting to be a pain in your butt because they get really aggressive at 3. And it gets worse at 4 and at 5. At 5, I mean, they just want to split skulls, with another buck. That's all they want to do. So I honestly don't even like having 4-year-old bucks on my farm. But the 3-year-old in my dominant buck is enough that on mock scrapes and stuff, it really gets your older bucks going. But yet it doesn't scare off too much of the younger bucks if they go smell it.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So you try not to keep a 4-year-old deer because of their attitude, pretty much what you're saying.
Yeah, if he is, you're going to have to almost keep him by himself because, I mean, all he wants to do is fight.
Gotcha. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. That's something that, you really don't think about a deer farm having to worry about too much testosterone level. And with, this is something that we've really not got into with another person, talking about how old they keep their deer and how old they need to be before they collect on. And that just, it all makes sense that you're starting to see that higher testosterone level in a 3-year-old versus a 1 or 2-year-old or a younger buck. And do you ever collect at all on younger bucks, or is it all mostly on the 3-year-olds?
I've did it on 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and 4-year-olds, and I just seen the best results on the 3-year-olds. And once I seen that, I knew I didn't have to keep a 4-year-old unless he's a really, really special buck. And for me on my farm, that would mean a huge typical. Then I would keep him for 4, but then I would breed with him. Then it's not bad. If I've got him with a pen of does, he's fine. He doesn't have another buck in that pen to fight with.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So, over how many years have you been collecting deer urine?
I started in 2013.
Okay, so from 2013 to now, can you tell the difference in the smell of urine when a doe's in estrus?
Oh yeah.
Once you bottle it, you can crack the lid and be like, wow, there's such a major difference.
Yeah, I can. And when I got to specify here a little bit or whatever, I'm around this all the time and I really, really study and stuff. Yeah, I can. I can even tell the difference in a blind test between the buck pee, the doe pee, or my bedding scent.
No kidding.
Yeah, but I mean, it takes a lot of smelling to distinguish that.
Right.
A lot of years of smelling.
Yeah, it's like a good wine taster. You smell it, you just know right off the bat what it is.
Yeah. I got to tell you a little story here of when I go out deer hunt, sometimes during the rifle season on opening morning, my wife comes with me. And there's times where I'm walking out there in the dark and I don't like a headlight on or nothing. And I'm doing my drag line with the doe estrus and I stop and the wife goes, "What are you stopping for?" And I said, "There was a buck just standing here." And she goes, "How do you know that?" Smell. I mean, I could just smell that rutted up buck. He was just standing there minutes before me. And I don't know if you've ever smelt that in the wild or not, but once your nose gets in tune with that, boy, you can smell them in bedding areas and in places like that.
This could be a new gig for you, that you can walk a farm and tell guys if there's a rut.
Well, everything's got to work out just right. I mean, one had to be there and urinate for me to do that.
Right. But I mean, I'm guessing it'd be safe to say that you're a urine master. I mean, you're around it all the time.
Yeah, I am.
That I'm kind of jealous that you have that capabilities. I mean, I've smelled a rutted buck, but usually it's got an arrow or hole sticking out of him when I walk up on him.
Yeah, or you're skinning them,
Right. Oh yeah, you definitely smell the dorsal glands, and know that they've been some activity going on in their urine. There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you what, the fresh doe estrus urine will smell sweet. That's one way to know if it's fresh.
Gotcha.
It actually has a sweet smell.
So if you crack a bottle of deer urine and it chokes you out, is that something that you need to be concerned about, or?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Okay. So mine being it's 100% pure, because I get feedback, like on my Instagram, my Facebook or whatever, just say, wow, this is so strong, because they're not used to smelling deer scent that is strong like that. Because I do not cut mine with water. It is 100% urine. Gotcha. And that takes some people. You don't want to like crack the bottle and get a whole nose full. You want to sniff it from, say, 6 inches away or whatever.
Gotcha. You shouldn't like taste test it or anything.
No. I wouldn't advise that.
Okay. Well, I mean, this question's always thought I'd ask a urine guy.
Right.
Have you ever? Okay, I got a question for you. Have you ever accidentally splashed it in your face and got in your mouth?
Oh yeah, I've had it everywhere.
Oh man.
That's terrible.
Yeah, I've had from doing all kinds of different activities here with the deer, whatever. I've been peed on. I'm sure you're a farmer. You got beef cows. I'm taking it.
Yep.
So
yeah. I've been in some situations.
Yeah. So right here, you're having a doe, giving birth or whatever, and you got to help pull out the fawn. You get absolutely. That stuff all over you.
That makes completely sense. That that's all part of being a deer farmer. That there's just no way around it.
Yeah, and you would know just like I am. For me and you, that's the smell of money. We don't look at it as, hey, disgusting or bad or whatever. It's the smell of money.
I've actually stopped, checked on my cattle at my parents' farm, and I've stopped and checked on my herd and ran into some issues and some really nice clothes. And I looked pretty nice when I showed up there, but when I got back in the truck to head home, I was completely disgusting, covered manure, thinking, man, I really screwed up here. These are nice clothes.
Yeah, you just looked at the task at hand and took care of it, right?
Absolutely. And I'm assuming it's the same with deer farming as it is with any other farm. You got fence to maintain, you got stalls to maintain, you got to feed, you got to, you're jack of all trades, master of none when it comes to running a deer farm.
Yeah, I'm here all the way from I don't even know where you'd want to start the process or whatever, but say from fawn all the way through the breeding program, through the feed, through the collection, through the labels, through the social media, everything goes through me. It's just a one-man show here. Right. My wife does help put some orders together for me. And sometimes she'll help bottling or put the labels on the bottle, because I do all that by hand too.
Right. As far as sanitary, what's involved with, is it almost as like handling milk? You got to be super sanitary?
Well, okay. So here's what I do for a job. I'm a USDA food inspector.
Okay. So you've already got the program down.
I've already got the program down. And here's what you're wanting. So like in that collection stall, when that urine's in there, you want to, between each one of them does, you want to wash it down so that urine isn't going to, embed in the material that them grates are made of and stuff. You want to wash it down, but yet you don't want to use a chemical that's going to smell.
Gotcha.
And get in the scent or whatever. So yeah, you want to wash really good and know what to wash with so that it doesn't go into the scent.
Can we get into that a little deeper? Is it, I'm assuming it's just like cleaning a dairy parlor. You got to get in there with sanitizing soap and get into a little bit more detail on how do you clean the stall as far as product. What do you got to use to clean a deer stall?
I like to use pressure washer and hot water is what I like to use, because I like to stay away from the chemical because I'm just so afraid it's going to get into that urine.
completely makes sense. And that hot water will definitely cut the contamination.
Right.
So that's pretty basic. That's not, the money. I was curious on what the cost was to clean a stall. But sounds like that the hot water and, people that don't know that they make a pressure washer that will, get scalding hot water coming out the nozzle. So interesting.
Yes.
Super interesting.
I'm learning a lot listening to you guys go. Just the knowledge that both of you have about farming and deer farming and cow farming, it's mind blowing, really. Like it's stuff I've never heard before in my life.
It just makes a great conversation when two guys can talk about, obviously Richard's got the knowledge on the deer farming, and I'm no pro farmer by far, but I've done my research and educated myself enough that if I want to raise cattle in the correct manner, I've educated myself enough on my my breeding techniques and protocols and sanitary and sterilization. It makes it super interesting that me and Richard can get into depth talking about deer. It's pretty much the same concept. Besides, I don't need to tranquilize the cows because I can run them in a head gate. Catch them in the head gate. I can put my cedars in, induce my shots, whatever I need to do right there. But I mean, I get it with the deer that's definitely a different process. And I'm sure, Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, but the stress level is way high for the deer, where the cattle, they can take the pressure and a little bit of stress, where the deer, I don't think can.
You're 100% right. If you try to put them in like a headlock, like a stanchion or that lock on a cattle chute, I honestly think they would pull, you know what I mean, until they did damage to themselves. They would try to pull and pull and pull backwards, and it wouldn't be good. So in deer, you can either tranquilize or you can use a drop chute.
Gotcha.
And the drop chute, it's actually, it can be quite a bit of work. You have little boxes that you keep running the deer forward and then close. Actually, let's just say like a sheet of plywood goes down, so you keep like inching them forward. And let's just say every 3 feet there's that plywood, and then you open the last one and it goes into that drop chute. So then what happens is it's a V shaped, and then it drops the floor out, so they lose their feet, so to speak.
Yep.
Yeah, and then they're held actually by their rib cage and stuff, and you can do it that way too.
Gotcha. I just wonder. I wonder if you ever get a chance, Richard, and I know you're busy and you've got a lot on your plate. I wonder if you could halter break a young fawn, to where that you could get her to the point where you could lead her into a head gate. I wonder if that was ever a possibility. Not saying.
Excuse me.
No, you're good. You're way good. I just wonder if that was ever something that somebody attempted. And like the cattle, obviously, if you don't work with the cattle, they're just as wild as a wild deer if you let them be. From a calf age forward, we halter break, tie them, and they're standing at tied with a halter where we can get them halter broke, and then we walk them and work with them. I just wonder if the deer could be, if that was ever a possibility for the deer, that you could actually get them comfortable going into a head gate system.
I think you could. It would just be how comfortable they were with the head gate, but I think through the training they would. But definitely, you would want to bottle feed.
Right.
You'd want to bottle feed that fawn. You take them away from mom, and that's where they're the tamest like that or whatever, because she's the one that's going to teach them to run from people. And you can lead her all around. And I'm sure if you put her in that head restraint early on, I think you'd be fine.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just something, another, just a talk topic, tangent that just come to my mind, that I wonder if you just work with them, if you could get them. But, obviously that'd be more time and more effort, and, and that's something that time and money sometimes don't add up on, on a product like urine. You don't want to invest all that time. Yeah, you want calm deer, but then again, there's limitations on where the profit versus time comes in.
Exactly right.
Just curious, how do you know off the top of your head how much a pack of, let's say, a 10-pack of cedars is for the deer? Obviously, they're going to be smaller than the cattle, but I was just curious.
How much are the cattle ones roughly?
I think they're $12 a piece.
That sounds about right. I was gonna say $10-11 a piece for these.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I was just curious about that, and something, and mark this, Jay, that once we get on this conversation, talk with me about that when you get done, Richard. Just off the record here.
Yep.
But So after you've what's your summer look like on the deer farm? What are you doing throughout the summer months to keep the deer going?
Well, you're wanting to keep, I mean, this is just a lot like the wild deer, the bucks. You want the stress level down if you want to grow like really nice bucks. You want the stress level down and definitely really good food and clean water. The summer actually is a low stress time and a high stress time because when they're in velvet, you really got to watch that they don't bump anything. They won't push each other. You don't have to worry about that. But if there's any trees or if there's the gate or a post or anything, you just got to make sure that they don't bump their velvet on that, because once they split that velvet, they'll bleed like a stuck hog. And that goes into age too. A yearling doesn't have that much blood flow going the antlers, but boy, a 4-year-old, you better be on it within the hour or within a couple hours.
Or they'll bleed out.
Or they'll bleed out, and our good friends the fly will get in there and lay eggs,
Yeah,
and then you'll get the maggots, and then you'll get antler infection. And the deer, being a wild animal, they're going to go hide. They try to hide all their symptoms, act real tough so that predators don't see that they're weak. So
Right.
you got to have a really trained eye to see when there's an issue with the deer.
Gotcha. So if you get a deer run into an infection into the antler, the velvet stage, is that something a vet takes care of, or is that something you can handle in house?
I handle it in house.
Okay, walk us through that. So you got a deer with an infected antler, and what do you do there?
Okay, so could I ask you to even describe it better? Just because whatever you ask for the question, I'm going to answer it that way. Tell me on what part of that antler that the tear is and that the infection is.
Let's go in between the G2 and G3. He's got a tear in the velvet area, starting to see infection on the main beam.
Okay, so here's what I'll do. I mean, I'll tranquilize him. I'll knock him down, and then I'll give him some Banamine, for pain. And once he's down, I'll go look at that. So I'll go lower than the antler infection, and then there's several things you can do: a zip tie or a piece of just regular fencing wire, and then you got to put like a tourniquet on there, because you got to stop that blood flow. There's blood. That blood is just going there like no other. That's how them antlers grow so fast. It's all blood supply. So you got to get that stopped. So you'll first of all, you stop the bleeding with that wire. I like wire a lot. You'll put that wire on there. You'll twist it real tight, and then you'll cut that. You'll remove that infected portion. And then you'll put what a loose shield is?
Yep.
Yeah, I like a loose shield. You spray that, which is a liquid bandage. You spray that on there and then let it dry. And then you're going to give him a series of shots too to prevent infection, And you might as well worm them while you're doing that too. But so basically, you remove that and stop the bleeding. Some of the older deer farmers and stuff really like to put pine tar on the end. You got to stop the bleeding and make it harden up fast, and you want to prevent any new flies or anything getting on it. So a lot of times I'll spray that entire antler with a fly spray also.
Gotcha. Okay, so I wonder if cauterizing would be a method that would be a possibility to get that sealed up, and where you can.
You could. I've heard of people doing that.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious about that. I know a lot of times, even on a cattle horn or something, I've heard the guys take a hot wire and just heat it up and sterile wire and get it red hot, burn through, and it pretty much cauterize any kind of blood vessels or blood flow. I was just curious that if a deer antler could be cauterized too.
It can. I just never did that because this method seemed to work really well, and it's pretty quick.
Yeah. So
I've actually got a video on my Instagram. It'll probably go back 2 years or whatever. It shows me darting, and I got a video of doing that. And if you really go back on the Instagram, I even got a darted buck that's snoring. I don't know if you've seen that video or not, but if you want a good chuckle, go back and look at that.
That's Cook's Fatal Deer Attractant.
Cook's Fatal Attraction Deer Scent. Yep.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. But just interesting. So when you zip tie or wire tie, you got to dispose of the antler from that point to the end. You got to take the whole.
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. I was just curious how far you got to take it, but cut the whole antler off or cut the circulation off to the whole antler. That makes sense.
And now describe me like how big of a rack this buck's got, because there can be other problems this can lead to. Tell me just like an inch size or whatever.
Say 145-inch deer.
145, you might be all right with just taking that one side off. Now, if
Okay,
you get up into a really heavy one, you got to worry about balance of the antlers.
gotcha.
So if you were to cut off at the G2 and his other side, let's just say there's 150 inches of antler on his left beam, and we remove the right beam.
Right.
He's going to walk around lopsided his head, and that's going to get you a lot of problems. On a deer like that, you would really be best off to cut him off just above his bases, both sides. And because you already wrecked that rack anyway, just cutting it off between the G2 and the G3,
Gotcha.
you've already wrecked it or whatever. So
Okay.
for the animal safety, you're better off to remove both sides if it's going to be lopsided.
That makes sense. It just seems like neck issues, balance issues, is always plays a role in all that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, yeah, that completely makes sense. So, not only are you, farming deer urine, you're taking care of a herd of deer like they're your cattle, and there's a lot of things there's more education there than one would expect.
Right.
You've got to do more than most would think.
Yeah, that's true. It's 365 days a year,
Right.
and
Yeah.
you know when that antler infection happens is when it usually happens. You see it on about a Friday night when the wife's already waiting in the car. You get home from work, and she's about waiting in the car to hurry up and go something. And you go, hey, I got to walk the deer fence one last time here. And then that's when you see that. So guess what happens? Oh yeah, that's farming, right?
That's it. You got something planned, and the animals tell you something different.
Yeah, and you got to take care of it.
Yeah, interesting. But man, I tell you what, we've got pretty deep on some deer farming here, and then it's definitely it's been a fun ride with you, Richard, for that part of it. I enjoyed that thoroughly, and there's so many more things we could touch on. I've got 4 or 5 things in my mind that we can touch on, but we may have to revisit this and actually get into the deer farming side of things and walk through this year. It would be fun for sure. I would definitely be down for that. But Jay, you want to get into some memorable hunting?
Actually, I want to get into some products here. You talked about some products as you were talking about the harvest of the urine, the collection techniques. But I want to get into each product that you have, how to use it, what it's for, and basically how it's made in a sense, like through collection techniques. Because you've got some labels and the names of your scents are different than a lot of the scents I've ever seen. Like I haven't seen anywhere in any store on any brand some of the names that you have. So I'm curious about what some of these things are and how to use them, when to use them, that kind of thing.
Okay, so if you just want to tell me which scent, and then I'll answer the question.
All right, so the first one that this is just standard. I've seen these in a lot of different companies have just the doe in heat. And if we could, because you have absolutely 100% established yourself as a deer urine expert after the conversation you had with Dusty, then I want to know what that means. We all think we know what that means, but what does that mean to a deer urine expert? What's doe in heat?
Well, it means you can call it doe in heat or doe estrus, but I see so many call it the doe estrus. And when I bought my first bottle back when I was 12, it was actually called doe in heat. So I really like that name. But what it is it's a doe that is ready to be standing there for the buck to breed is what that means. And when you want to use that product I got so many customers that tell me how they use it, and there's so many different uses. For me, my 100% favorite way to use the doe in heat is before the wild deer come into estrus, because them bucks are on their feet, they're searching for that hot doe and they can't find it. But on your trail cameras you see it, that them bucks are on their feet, they're traveling. If you can put that scent down before the deer in your area are in estrus, boy, you really increase the odds of getting that buck to come in front of you, which I like to use a drag line. That's my favorite way of using it.
Okay, so you're recommending drag lines.
Yes, I love drag lines.
Okay, all right. Next one, dominant buck.
So the dominant buck is, I start off in about August with mock scrapes, and I like to put that in conjunction with my scent rope. I don't know if you've seen my scent rope on my website or not.
Yes, I have. Yep.
Yeah, it's like an 18-inch piece of hemp rope, and then I'll tie that from like the licking branch, or I'll make my own in the area where, say, like a little point on a field or wherever you know that deer is going to stop. That's what I use the dominant buck for early in the season. Later in the season, I also use dominant buck on a drag line, because that buck that you're after, your hit list buck, he's already established a pecking order with the bachelor group that he was in all fall with. And now you got this intruder buck in the area. And he comes to the mock scrape. He's visiting. He smells it. He don't know who it is. And if you can do that on a drag line too, hey, I'm going to go follow this deer. That works out well for many hunters.
Gotcha. All right. Now this is one that I have not seen before. Certified peak doe estrogen. All right. So this is different than doe and heat.
It is.
All right. How is it different? What does it mean? This is one of those unique labels I've never seen anywhere.
And I'll tell you, I'm going to probably kind of like skirt around a little bit of like the collection of that one, because it's a different process than my doe estrus. And why I say that is because you haven't seen it a whole lot. It's because a lot of the producers do not know how to collect that scent.
Okay. So
and it's certified peak doe estrogen, because actually when I collect that scent, I actually send a small sample into a university, and they certify that there's 30 picograms per milliliter or better of estrogen in that estrus scent.
Okay, so this is,
and the most a doe can have is 50, and that's certifying there's at least 30. I mean, that there. Here's what I tell all my customers that message me or anything. They say, "Hey, what's the difference between a doe and heat and a doe estrogen?" And here's what I say. Your hit list buck, does he keep you up at night? And if they say, yeah, I say, you better buy the peak doe estrogen. If not, the doe and heat works awesome too. But if you're after that one, the other one is a hotter estrus.
Okay. All right. That's very cool. I've not seen that before. Dusty, have you seen that anywhere? I mean, I think that's just unique.
I have heard of it, Jay, but not really got into the science of it.
Okay. All right. So this is more proprietary stuff, Richard, that we really don't want to get into detail about.
It is. And I work with a group of veterinarians and stuff. And they were really influential on helping me develop that product.
Okay. All right. You have the Keep 'em Calm scent. Now, I've seen similar things like this before, but never really understood the science behind it. What is that? How does that work? How do you apply it in the woods?
So it's a bedding scent. And I'll collect that from usually the doe and fawn. This is where I'll put 2 in a collection stall, or maybe 3 if it's a doe with twin fawns. If they're female fawns, I don't want any buck scent in my bedding scent. Maybe others do, but I just don't want that, because I just want it to be the regular doe scent. And what it is you put it around your tree stand, or you put it on your boots. So when you walk in there, that they're thinking that a deer just walked there, not that a human had walked there. So like on my scent sticks, that works really well to rub on your rubber boots, to apply on ladder stands or fence posts or the tree that you're sitting in. I really like to, if I'm sitting 15 foot high in a tree, it doesn't matter the height, 15, 25, I like to rub some of it right at my shoulder height. So if a wind comes up and you got a buck downwind from you, if he does get some scent, he is also getting that scent in that wind too.
Okay. So you've got dominant buck, but you've also got this stuff called rutting buck. What's the difference?
That's where me and Dusty kind of talked there when I put that buck in that collection stall adjacent to that doe estrus when I'm collecting that. And he's getting all rutted up and wanting to breed. So that scent is collected from him in that state.
Okay.
And used in mock scrapes, on decoys. That's the most common way. On the scent rope, of course.
Okay. All right. So, and do deer recognize that as in males to males? Do they identify a rutting buck versus a dominant buck?
That is a good question. I don't know that they do or not. They don't like either one of them, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Typically, you know.
Okay.
But I had requests for it. You know, hey, do you got rutting buck? Do you got dominant buck? You know.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, as hunters, we'll try anything, right? see what happens.
Right. And I may go into more lines too. I know I get a lot of requests there out on the East Coast, kind of by where you live or whatever. A lot of them like the preorbital dominant buck. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get into that next year.
Preorbital. All right. What is that?
The preorbital gland, the forehead gland on a buck,
where
he's rubbing on that licking branch.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I'll introduce that into the dominant buck scent.
So you'll get that scent into your dominant buck scent as well.
Exactly.
Okay. That's okay. Got it. All right. So let me just go back here. You've got a couple other products. So you've got a bedding scent as well, which is different than your Keep 'em Calm. Is that correct?
Yeah. And really it is the same scent. When I really like that, when I first started, I really liked that name, Keep 'em Calm. And then it just seemed like it wasn't really catching on. And you see a lot of people asking, hey, bedding scent. They were taking the Keep 'em Calm off. They were just saying, hey, you got any of that bedding scent? So when I went into my liquid form, I called it, especially like in my 4-ounce bottles is where I do it a lot. I don't have any Keep 'em Calm in 4-ounce bottles. I just called it bedding scent. It really is the same scent as Keep 'em Calm bedding scent. It's just
different name. Okay.
Different name.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I mean, bedding scent, I guess hunters can relate to that a little different. All right. And then, so those are all the deer scents I think you have, right? Those are all the pure deer
The urine,
scents.
the urine scents?
Yeah, the urine scents.
Yeah, I do have synthetic doe and heat, and I do have synthetic dominant buck for states like yours of New Hampshire that require that.
Gotcha. Okay. And then you've also got some other products, sweet corn, dirt, kind of
white oak acorn.
White oak acorn. Those
sweet red apple.
Yep. And those are kind of standard, right? These are not scents that you're making. These are I would assume.
I actually do make them.
Do you? Okay.
I do. Yeah. I'm that guy who grew up on a farm there, probably a lot like Dusty or whatever, and grew up on that dairy farm. And you know, a guy didn't have much money to go buy stuff and stuff, so you made a lot of your own stuff, you know, and I always kept that work ethic in me, and I like to make a lot of my own stuff.
Very interesting.
So yeah, I get the ingredients, you know, but I actually do the formulation and everything. I make it in-house.
Okay. So you brought up a good question, your comment brought up a good question in my head. The synthetic versus the non-synthetic. How does the synthetic come into play? And you know, I've seen some, I guess some sentiments about the synthetics not being as effective as some of the true stuff. What are your thoughts on synthetics?
So I've got the deer herd here. So when I make the synthetics, you know, I can test it on my deer before the deer out on the other side of the fence, you know? So I can kind of get instant results on how they show reaction to it. And here's my take on it. The 100% urine is better. There is no doubt about that. But they will go. If I put a scent wick up by my bucks, they'll go there and continue to go there and stick their nose in it. But I do notice that they don't stay there as long. They'll go there and smell it every time. If they walk by it 10 times in a day, they'll go stick their nose in it each time. But that attention span to it is a little less.
Okay. All right. And then you have multiple versions of these scents. You have the 1 ounce, you have the 4 ounce. Then you've also got the stick, which is, I think, like a wax base, almost like a underarm deodorant type container. Can you describe how how each are effective, and there is anything that, as the consumer, the hunter consumer, that we need to be aware of when we're buying different versions of this and different mediums?
So the scent stick, that there wax is a natural preservative, so that there can sit out at room temperature. It can you can slide it in your hunting pack real easy. It's not going to spill, so it's a real convenient. That wax, if you put it on, like I said, the ladder stand, the legs, or a tree, it repels water, so that scent will stay there a really, really long time. On them scent ropes, I only touch mine up probably once every 2-3 weeks, because you come back and you can still see that wax embedded in that rope. Or if you do a vine, like a natural vine, I mean, you'll see it stay that white color 3 weeks after you apply it.
Gotcha. Very interesting. Richard, this has been fascinating. Just a journey that I did not expect to take in this conversation, but I've learned a ton. And Dusty, I would imagine that you've kind of compared some of this stuff to what you do on the farm with cattle.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a huge comparison.
Yeah. It's a whole other world that I don't know if, the day-to-day hunter really understands what they're buying when they buy this stuff and how different things are made. And Richard, you are definitely like, to know that you're doing this on your farm and not just buying it from a bunch of other farms and then bottling it up and you're like the middleman. This makes me feel good. Like, this feels like I'm going to the farm to buy the produce. I'm not it's not just mass produced. I'm getting some real authentic organic stuff here, so to speak.
100% natural, no water and no preservatives. Preservatives are only good for two things, and that is the scent producer and the store, so that they can stay on a shelf. And then if they don't sell it that year, it can stay till the next year,
Right.
None of my scent here is carried over from year to year. What I don't sell this year here, I'll dump it all out and I start over fresh next fall.
Wow. I imagine that you must move through this stuff pretty quick.
Yeah, I do. I do.
All right.
What I would dump would actually be more, because like where Dusty is in Ohio, I think they can go till like February hunting, and some of the southern states too. So I want to have it on hand for them customers, and you just don't know how much you're going to sell, at that time. So
right.
So I do dump some each year.
Do you end up sending stuff to Florida when the rut is like, I think it's super early. It's like August or something like that.
Yeah, I do. Actually, as a matter of fact, there isn't 1 month in a year that I do not sell scent, and I'm talking urine scent. Mm-hmm. There is not 1 month out of the year that I don't ship it.
Fascinating. Very interesting.
And there's only one state I haven't shipped to yet, and that would be Hawaii.
And when it comes down to the synthetic stuff versus the real stuff, do you have to know which states that you can sell it? Is that like the regulations like that?
No, that all falls on the hunter.
Okay.
As a producer, I can sell just like stores are. I can sell urine to New Hampshire. As a matter of fact, I just sent some there this week or whatever. I can send it there, but it's your obligation as the hunter to follow the regulations of your state to whether you can use it or not.
Gotcha. All right. Very good to know. Excellent. So, Richard, being around deer all the time, studying deer scent, understanding all that stuff, you making this stuff to sell to other people, do you have a particular cover scent that you like to use the most?
I do. For a cover scent, I love using my bedding scent.
Okay.
But as far as for my clothing and like when I'm prepping to go out to hunt, I've actually got a technique that I do, but it's not like anything that I can sell or anything.
All right.
So I had mentioned that I got that collection stall and I got a deer shed. So you know how most hunters like to put their clothing out in the garage or out in a tote or whatever.
Yep.
I'll stick my clothing, my hunting clothing, my camo, I'll stick it in that deer shed, and it's going to smell like them deer.
Of course.
It's embedded, but I even go a little bit further than that. I'll usually take my tamest doe. So here I am, and I actually walk out to my bow stand, from my house or whatever. So there's no vehicle, there's none of that or whatever. But I'll fully dress in my camo, and I'll go over and I'll get that tame doe, and I'll just sit and pet her like you're petting your dog. And I'll get that deer hair all over my pants, all over my boots, all over my chest. And when I walk out to that deer stand, I've probably got 150 deer hair all over my body. And when you go up into that stand, if that wind switches or if anything, man, I've never been spotted by a deer when I use that technique. It's a pretty good one, and I know it's pretty much limited to a deer farmer or a neighbor of a deer farmer, but it's been really good for me.
Yeah, how do you bottle that up and sell it? That would be brilliant.
I think there's something out there like deer dander or something that comes off.
Yeah, I don't know how they do it or whatever, but you're talking about like the Fitzgeralds is what you're talking about. They're the ones that really started that, right?
Right. Yeah. That sounds right. Yes.
What a journey this has been. Quite an educational piece, to say the least. So what I'd like to do, Richard, is go on a memorable deer hunt with you. I mean, you've got a lot of knowledge about whitetail here that most common hunters do not have. So I'm interested to hear kind of how you put all this together, knowing that you got some of the best attractant in your bag walking into the woods. And the other night we talked a little bit. You said you had a couple of really interesting stories, but I'd like to hear a couple kind of putting all this together.
So the one I was telling you was actually pre my deer scent. It was actually in 2006 when I harvested a buck here on the farm. And where my deer farm is here is actually, my deer stand is actually like 15 feet behind my house. There was no house here back in 1983. And that is where my deer stand is. And I hunted them woods. And then now that deer stand is actually in my deer pen. But anyway, to go on to that hunt there, way back in 2000, there was this buck that was just crossing the gravel roads here, and you would hear the neighbors talking, man, did you see that buck? I'd hear them talking to my dad and stuff, and my mom, and then I would always hear a lot of this like secondhand. Boy, 2:00 in the morning, and that's what I kind of like in the back of my mind wanted to call it, like the 2:00 buck. 2:00 in the morning, he would always just come run right across the road, and you could never get a good look at him. And everybody said, that big buck out there, that big buck out there. So I bought this place in 2002, and in that year, I bought my first trail camera, and I stuck it up. And October 23rd, I got a picture of that buck. I had never, ever seen that buck, just heard about it. And here it was just he was about 210 pounds he would have dressed, and 13 points. And I want to say he was like 20 and 3/4 inch spread on him. He has a pretty good sized deer. And that was the only picture I got of him. And then he left. And I just kept checking that, probably more than what I should have. I would say probably once a week I would go out there and check that. And granted, I only had one camera. Well, I wasn't getting this picture. So, of course, I went and bought a second camera. And I put that up. And finally, on December 10th, I got a picture of him. And he was coming out of, there's about a 3-acre low spot here with cattails. And he was coming out of there. And then I go, I bet he's bedding there. And then every day he was coming out of there. But I shouldn't say day. Every night he was coming out of there. He was still holding true to that 2:00 in the morning. That's when he would come out of there and he would head to the north. And I know he's bedded down in there. On December 10th, he showed up, and he was coming through at about 2:00 in the morning pretty consistently. And this year, it was kind of a wet year. The moisture content was wet, and my dad had quit farming and took a job, so he rented his land out, and there was a cornfield back here, about a 5-acre cornfield, and that buck was going to that cornfield. And but still, 2:00 in the morning, and here I am going out when I can, usually a Saturday evening sit, and nothing. I mean, I never ever laid eyes on this deer, but I would notice, we had about 8 inches of snow. I would notice that this buck would always drag the tips of his rear hooves in the snow, and then there was a big track in there, and I was, wow, I wonder if that's him. So I moved one of them cameras to that trail of the snow, and that was him. And then later on in December, was walking around in the snow there looking for that track, and I seen him coming out of a tamarack swamp, which is about 100 yards from that bedding area. So he had moved. He wasn't bedding. I wasn't getting him on that camera, and he had moved to this tamarack. In Minnesota here, December 31st is the last day of archery season. It was about 10 degrees out, and I went and climbed up one of my lock-on stands here, and it was pretty much a Hail Mary. I had seen that he had walked down that trail because of that dragging the back foot, and it was cold. I went out there about an hour and a half before dark, just on a long shot that, hey, he's got to be getting hungry. Went through the rut, and I could see on them last pictures that he had probably dropped about 30 pounds. So I knew he was going to need to get to that cornfield or some food source. And here, I'm just freezing up there on the stand and just waiting for, come on, get dark so I can go back to the house. And
Right.
and I look at, I'm sitting there looking at my watch, and there's 10 minutes left. There's 7 minutes left. There's 5 minutes left. And this was a really dark colored deer. And here he come. The trail that was coming by that way was my spot in my shooting lane was 22 yards. I've already played that out 1,000 times in my head. I bet I spent 1,000 hours looking at that computer and that picture of that buck. And here he comes, first time ever. So we've been seeing this deer from the year 2000, and this is 2006. I had his sheds from 2003 that I got right behind my house, and that's kind of an interesting story. I had walked out there and I had found one side, and I had a male black lab, and I was working the night shift, and he was out there with me. I found that one side of that shed. I come back in, went to sleep. I woke up and I looked here on the deck. He had laid the other half of that shed. He knew what I was looking for, I guess. He laid the other half of that shed right on my deck. So that was a great present. But
Crazy.
but anyway, that buck's coming, and there's 5 minutes of shooting left. And he was just coming at a slow pace. He was an older buck, and he just had his head at that one position, didn't look up, just walking real slow. And when he got to my shooting lane there at 22 yards, I pulled back my old Browning Mirage. I don't know if you know what kind of bow that is or not. I pulled that back and I sent that beam and arrow with a thunderhead right through his lungs. And like I had said, 10 degrees. After I shot him, I was so cold. I remember looking down at the ground. I was up about 15 feet. I remember looking down at the ground, and there was probably about 8-10 inches of snow. And I was so cold, I remember thinking, I don't even want to climb down. I just wanted to jump down to the ground. Right. But how cold I was, I figured, you better not. So I shimmied down that tree, and I couldn't wait to get back to the house here, grab my cell phone, and call my best friend, because me and him probably had 2,000 hours talking about this deer and, how I was going to harvest them and stuff. I remember picking up my cell phone, and between the excitement and the freezing, I dropped it about 3 times before I could call him. And all I could say was, when I picked it up, I said, Gino, I think I got him. You better come over here. Because I didn't even go follow him. I knew it was a good hit. I didn't go follow him. It was already dark. And I just wanted to let him sit until my buddy could come out here and help me, track him. And here it turns out he went about 25 yards is all that he had went. And he was laying there. He was laying there dead.
That's awesome.
168 5/8 inches.
That's a good buck.
He grossed.
Wow.
Which is a giant. We've got some big deer here in Minnesota or whatever, but that is really a giant for here. Most people are probably taking a 140 to a taxidermist here,
Yeah. Yep. That makes sense. What a great story. That's awesome.
I actually took his jaw off and had it sent in for aging. He was 8.5 years old.
That's an old buck.
It is.
Wow. That's amazing. Very
nice
cool.
Story.
And so when he bedded in that swamp where I had said, I went back and revisited that or whatever. The next morning when it got light, I went in there. And I don't know if you ever seen these beds or not, but it was about the size of a pickup truck. and he was in a spot where he could run 360 degrees. So I knew he was there for that entire fall, and I've got a wood boiler out the back of my house that's probably only 75 yards away from that. And I remember sitting there throwing wood into my stove, and I would actually talk to that deer, or maybe I'm just crazy, but I would say, you know what? I know you're laying in that bed, but there is no way I can get to you. And either you're going to die of old age, or I'm going to stick an arrow through you, one or the other. But, we're going to see where this journey ends.
It does drive you a bit crazy, doesn't it? When you got that buck, you got it, and that you're looking for, and yeah, you do talk to him. You do.
I did. I mean, I would physically, say it out there because I knew I wasn't going to scare him here, just talking in the yard all the time,
Yep.
But it makes me wonder. Okay, so from 2000 to 2006, that's 6 years of me never laying eyes on that buck. I can get a little bit crazy this way in the way I think, but how many times did that buck see me?
Yeah, good point. Right.
Yep.
Probably a lot.
Yeah, and the story doesn't end there. In 2016, because I sell a lot of deer scent right off the farm here. Yep. In 2016, one of the neighbor kids stopped over, and he had asked about deer hunting and stuff like that, and we were swapping stories and stuff, and he was looking at my bucks in the pen and stuff, and he goes, wow. And he goes, I got to tell you a story about when I was 12 years old. He said, I seen the biggest buck in my life. He said, about a, I knew which farm he was talking about a mile and a half. Now, it wasn't his dad's farm. It was another person's property. And he said, I was sitting there and my dad gave me a 30-30 Marlin and sat me on a rock pile, lever action. And he said, all of a sudden, about 9 o'clock, I heard something. And he said, I turned around and looked, and he says, the biggest buck in my life come trotting up behind me. And he says, as I pulled up to put the crosshairs on its shoulder, he said that buck seen me at that same time and then took off running. And he said he had the hammer pulled back, but he pulled the trigger, and there was a second safety on that stopped the hammer from hitting the firing pin, and the gun just went click. And his dad never showed him that second safety. And he said that buck took off running across the 80-acre hayfield, and he said he could see them antlers go into the woods. And I said, wow, I was doing the math, because that was like 10 years ago. And I said, how old are you? He said, he's 22. So that would have put it back 10 years. I said, that was 2006. He goes, yeah, that was 2006, my first year of hunting. I said, do you think you'd recognize that buck? And he goes, yeah, why? What are you getting at? I said, come here. And I said, I think that buck might be hanging on my living room wall. And he come in the front door of the house. And I mean, the second his eyes were laid onto that shoulder mount, he goes, that's him. So for me, that's really awesome too, to know a history of that buck. And now why that buck left my property from October 23rd, didn't come back till December 10th, is because he wasn't the dominant buck. This wasn't his breeding grounds right here where I live.
Right.
Wow. Interesting. That's crazy.
And this is one thing you'll learn from like raising deer or whatever. The size of the headgear on that deer does not mean that he's the dominant buck. It's the size of the fight in the dog. Many of inferior rack bucks will fight till their death, where some of them bigger rack bucks won't. So if you're checking your trail card pictures and you just think that, hey, I got a 150 on camera and I've got a 130, that 150 has to be the dominant buck. That's not always true.
Right. Wow. What a great story. Love it. Well, Richard, I think I'm going to walk you through 10 rapid fire questions, if that's okay, just to get a little better picture of your personality. All right.
I'm ready.
What's your number one hunting tip of all time?
I would have to say, be quiet. Be quiet and don't move. I really like to just sit there, and if I'm in a lock-on or a ladder stand, I like to be the tree, Yeah.
It's like an old Fred Bear saying, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah. We all have these things that kind of drive us crazy if we leave them in the truck or at home, and we wish we had it with us while we're hunting. What's that one thing for you?
I kind of actually got two things. It depends upon if I'm bow hunting. If I'm bow hunting, it's probably my cell phone. If I'm rifle hunting, it's binoculars.
Okay. What's your biggest pet peeve in life?
I would have to say people that are gonna say people that are late to an appointment or tell you that they're going to do something and don't.
Yeah. Yep. That's a good one. How old are you today?
I'm 47.
47. All right. What would you tell the 24-year-old Richard Cook, knowing what you know today about life?
Boy, that's a tough question. I don't know that I would change a whole heck of a lot. I think I would say stay on the same path. I just wish that maybe I would have started in the deer scent business a little sooner, maybe in my 30s and not waited till I was 40.
Right. Okay. All right. You meet a stranger at a hotel lobby at a hunting convention somewhere in the world, and they ask you what you do for a living. What do you tell them?
I tell them I'm a USDA consumer safety inspector because that is my main job. But anybody that knows me, it would only be seconds that I would start talking about my deer scent and and that.
Gotcha. All right. What'd you have for breakfast this morning?
A bowl of cereal.
All right. Very good. You get your own billboard on the side of a highway. It's a blank canvas. You can put anything you want on it. What would it say?
I would say believe in yourself.
Nice. If I say the word successful, who's the first person that pops into your head and why?
I would say my grandpa. And why is because he was an entrepreneur, and I don't know, I've always been fascinated with that and wanted to be it. So for me, it would be him, and that's why.
Very cool.
Work for yourself.
Yep. What's a typical day in your life look like?
Boy, I get up early. I get up at 2:30 in the morning, and that's why I have that bowl of cereal because, it's pretty early to cook a breakfast.
Sure.
And I get up at about that time, and I get ready for work, and just before I leave, I check my website and see if there's any orders throughout the night because I want to get you that scent as fast as I can.
Mm-hmm.
So I allow about 15 minutes there to get orders ready. I go to work, start at 4 a.m. I got about a 45-minute drive to work. And on my breaks, maybe some of my coworkers don't even know who I am because I tell you what, on my half-hour dinner break, I'm running up to the post office mailing deer scent. And I come running back in, probably about 10 minutes left of my break or whatever, eat something real quick. And at the end of the shift, I'm running out the door to come back home and check on my deer. And I've got some pets. I've got some golden retrievers that I really love and spend a little bit of time with the wife and kids. And about that time, it's getting about 8 o'clock at night and I sleep for about 5-6 hours.
Gotcha. All right. And then finally, what's a typical deer hunting day in your life look like?
I've pretty much always hunted on property that I lived on. So pretty much wake up and walk right out the back door. Walk out the back door to my deer stands. And I like to sit there. If it's the rut, I like to sit there all day. If we're talking a bow hunt earlier on, I usually like to sit till about, say, 10 o'clock or so, and then come back and then go back out in the evening again and sit till dark.
Gotcha. All right. Very good. Those are the 10 rapid fire questions. Very cool. Richard, I got to tell you, man, this has been extremely educational. I had a blast. I learned a lot about you. I learned a lot about deer farming and collection techniques and your products, how to use them. And I think Dusty did too.
Absolutely.
And man, it's just been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's been an honor that you asked me to be a guest. I really appreciate it. I discovered you probably about 2 months ago, and I think I'm at probably about 70 of your episodes downloaded and played so far.
Wow, that's some commitment right there. That's
For
a lot.
Sure.
That's a lot of hours. So, Richard, where can we find more information about your products? If we've created more questions than answers as we sometimes do, where can we get more information about you and your business, and how do we reach out to you individually?
Cooksdeerscent.com has all of my products on it, and that's where you would place the order. Cook's Fatal Attraction Deer Scent on Facebook and on Instagram is my social media pages. And you can call me anytime, too. I've got my phone number on my website, but I can give that here, too. Do you take phone numbers?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
320-219-9709. You can call or text. A lot of times the text works better because I live in the hills, and sometimes my phone doesn't ring all the time,
Yeah.
And but a text usually comes through.
All right. Very cool, man. Well, we may have to do this again and go even deeper, because I feel like as much as I've learned and as much as deep as we went, I think Dusty has more questions.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure that we could talk for hours on even stuff we didn't even touch here.
Thanks to Richard for coming on the show. It truly was an eye-opener, mind-blowing, I would say. Richard gets into some stuff that I've never heard of, techniques that you just don't hear about typically, about when you buy a deer scent. You don't really understand the whole process about how it all gets handed down, or how it gets collected, or how it actually ends up in the bottle. And Richard really makes some good points about some of that stuff, and that why his is really probably going to be more effective than some of the other stuff that you're going to buy. And he does make the good point that if you can't get it done with his stuff, you're not getting it done with anybody's. So again, thanks to Richard. We may have to dive a little deeper, as I saw that Dusty and Richard were really hitting it off with their experience with animals into estrus so that they could be bred. So those guys need to have another show, I think, at some point. Dusty, where can we find you when you're not hanging out here in the studios with me?
Shoot me an email, dusty@bigbuckregistry.com. You can look me up on Instagram and Twitter @ChasingAntler, Facebook.com/ChubbyTinesOutdoors. Jay, where can the people reach out to you, or you're not on the mic?
Likewise, you can shoot me an email, jay@bigbuckregistry.com, and you can visit us on Facebook, facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Twitter, which is twitter.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Instagram, instagram.com/bigbuckregistry, and YouTube, which is youtube.com/bigbuckregistry. On YouTube, you can listen to all of our podcasts in their entirety. As far as videos are concerned, it's a boring video, but the audio content is there, so you can actually listen to our podcast. You can also listen to all of our live shows that we've done on Thursday nights when we do them, and we've gone back and re-interviewed a lot of our previous guests we had on the show just to put a face to a voice, let's put it that way. You can always listen to our show on other places as well, not just YouTube. We're found on Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and as an Amazon Alexa skill. Go to Alexa and say, "Alexa, enable Big Buck Registry." And if you would like to submit a buck to our page for consideration and be featured on our page in front of 250,000 diehard deer hunting fans, all you have to do is go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and all of the instructions will be right there. I think that's pretty much everywhere we're at. I think that's a wrap, Dusty.
That's a whole lot of big buck, Jay.
Sure is. I'm Jay Scott.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
And this is the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.